Well, thank you everyone for joining. So tonight is an info session. We do these occasionally for anyone who may have heard about Wild Ones and maybe wants to learn some more about who we are and what we do and how the organization works. Especially in the past couple weeks, we've had kind of a surge of interest following a couple Earth Day events that we did recently. We had a bunch of people, sign up and give us their contact information, really interested about what we do. So we tend to have one of these sessions, and then for anyone who's not able to make it, as you know, we are recording this session and we will make it available later. So if anyone who wasn't able to make it wants to find out more, they can do that. So we will be putting this on our website after we finish tonight. Let's go ahead and keep moving. And is the screen progressing for you guys? It looks like it is. Great, fantastic. Yeah, so just wanted to do a real quick welcome. We can do some introductions. So my name is Stephanie Best. I'm currently the acting membership chair for the Wild Ones Greater Cleveland chapter. We're also joined tonight by Jessica, who is our chapter president. Say hi, Jessica.
Hello.
There we go. And Ray Stewart, who is a board member of ours. If you want to give the camera a wave, Ray. There we go. Fantastic. And then we do have kind of a smaller group tonight. So if we want to go around and just do some introductions, we'd love to learn more about who you are and how'd you hear about Wild Ones? How did you find out about us?
I'll start. My name is Rachel Gilbert. Honestly, I was on Facebook and I got a Facebook notification, and I love native plants, and I've really started to really dive in the last 2 years, kind of changing out my landscaping and removing things that don't really serve the environment and planting things that do. And so I'm like, I don't know what this is, but I'm free at 7, so let's learn. So
that's so exciting. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us. I love the adventurous spirit there. I don't know what I'm walking into, but I'm available, so let's do it.
Yep.
I love it. Awesome. Who else is joining us tonight?
Lisa is also on the line, but she did comment that I believe she said that she has her grandson running all over, so she may not be able to speak.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense. And then I know Laura, I apologize. I should have introduced you earlier. Laura is joining us. Laura has recently joined the Greater Cleveland chapter and has also very graciously volunteered recently to help out with the membership committee. So she's been super helpful and supportive of me, particularly as we've been getting some of these, we send out emails and welcome notices to new members. If someone's interested and they let us know that they're interested in the chapter, we send out emails about that. So Laura's been helping me a lot with the membership outreach recently. So thank you, Laura, for your time. We really appreciate it. Awesome. I think that covers everyone. Like we said, kind of a smaller group tonight, but that's great. I love it. I love the intimacy. And so what we're going to do is I'm just going to go through some information about Wild Ones and just kind of share some information with you. So Wild Ones is a member-supported national 501c3 charitable organization that works to advance education about native plants and their use in landscaping our communities. Wild Ones was originally based in Wisconsin and is still based out of Wisconsin, and is sustained in large part by member dues and membership donations. So there's a small staff at the national office. They offer support and resources and guidance for the local chapters, but it's really the local chapters that are at the heart of the Wild Ones community. So volunteer chapter and national boards oversee and guide the structure of the organization, the vision, the mission, making sure that we're consistent, in everything that we do with that mission, as we work to make an impact in restoring habitat in private and public landscapes across the country. This photo here is from members of the Gibson Woods chapter in Indiana at the start of their annual native plant sale. A lot of times native species can be hard to find at nurseries, but in the past couple of years, even just a very kind of short amount of time, we have seen a huge boost in the number of nurseries locally that are willing to promote and sell native species. So that is really exciting. But we do see that a lot of chapters will still host native specific plant sales to boost the availability of native plants in their region. So Wild Ones is a member-supported and volunteer-driven organization with local chapters in 30 states. As of January, which I think is the last time I updated these slides, there are 77 Wild Ones chapters in both urban and less densely populated areas. Some of those range in size from a few dozen members up to a few hundred members. There are also 28 seedling chapters. Seedling chapters are sort of the new chapters, the baby chapters, if you will. They sprout up in response to a growing interest in native plants and habitat gardening. And these are chapters that have not yet met all of the requirements necessary to become a fully chartered chapter. So as we said earlier, Wild Ones started in the Midwest, and you can kind of see that from the map here. You know, it's really densely located around the Midwest, but it is spreading, and it is steadily expanding across the country as more people begin to recognize how important native plants are to local ecosystems. Just to share a little bit with you about the history of Wild Ones. Wild Ones is rooted in continuing education. I don't know if you guys are picking up on all of the like double entendres throughout this deck that are plant related, but I personally love them. Very proud of them. And just want to make sure that you are catching those as we go through this. So Wild Ones is rooted in continuing education. In 1977, we had a handful of individuals who attended a lecture by conservationist and activist Lori Otto at an Audubon workshop in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So these folks were inspired by Otto's work, and they began to refer to themselves as the Wild Ones. And that's how the first chapter sprouted into existence. And that cultivated a community of support for native landscapes. So these founders, you know, they thought it was really important to promote this mission because they recognized the many benefits that native plants bring to a garden setting, not the least of which is a closer connection to nature. I tell my fiance all the time, you know, if I'm having a rough day or a rough week, I usually know it because I will start to develop just like this craving of like, listen, I need to either touch dirt or touch yarn. My other big hobby is knitting. So it's either I need to touch dirt or I need to touch yarn. I need one of the two, preferably both. Just as a mental health thing, that's just my own thing. And I think a lot of folks are continuing to discover that gardening and that closer connection to nature, it really has positive mental health benefits. And so we're really hoping, you know, through the work that we're doing to continue to cultivate that and just help people develop that connection to nature. So Wild Ones promotes environmentally sound landscaping practices with the intent of preserving biodiversity through the preservation, restoration, and establishment of native plant communities. Wild Ones focuses on promoting native plant palettes and landscaping practices because we're invested in preserving and nurturing the variety of life in the world around us. It is the only national organization focused on native plants. Our vision is to become the most widely recognized advocate for natural landscapes and regenerative landscaping practices. Our mission, so excuse me, sorry, my slides progressed too quickly there. So our mission stems from our respect for the diverse species on this planet and also our concern for future generations. All of our members are valued. We also give personalized support to help network, help our members learn locally, and also be recognized for their efforts in native plant gardening. So as an organization, we're committed to offering educational resources that provide research-based evidence about native plants and their benefits. And I do personally think that that's a really important thing to call out is that last value. We're fresh and we're malleable. We understand that sometimes the research changes. And so the recommendations that we provide or the educational materials that we provide, sometimes those are also going to need to change. You know, as the research gets better or as we develop more research on what are the most restorative or regenerative planting practices, our recommendations will change, and we will openly and happily acknowledge that sometimes we may have recommended something, you know, 10, 20 years ago. That's not what we would recommend now. And I think that's a really valuable thing to keep in mind as we are working towards this goal of, you know, restoring native plant landscapes and trying to do what's best for the earth, is recognizing that sometimes the science changes. And we just need to incorporate that into our practices. So personally, I find that value to be really, really important as we're trying to, you know, continue to educate ourselves about native plant practices. But why native plants? So why do we care so much about native plants? Well, Native plants are really, really important for ecosystem health, and they form the foundation of regional food webs. Plants absorb minerals from the soil, they pull carbon from the air, they convert solar energy into food. We can't do this. As mammals, we cannot do this. Most animals can't do this. We can heat our homes, we can power our cars with solar energy, but we can't actually eat sunlight. I've tried, it's not possible. We cannot sustain our bodies without plants. People eat plants. Some people consume other creatures that also eat plants. Our diet depends on the ability of insects to both pollinate and consume plants. Insects, super important to the livelihood and the reproduction of those plants that sustain us and the people around us, and for some of us, the other animals that we also consume. One of the things that is really important is to recognize that a lot of insects tend to be specialists. And so they feed and pollinate a very narrow spectrum of plant life. And sometimes this is limited to just a single species. So renowned entomologist, Dr. Doug Tallamy, that's not the first time you're going to hear his name. We're going to talk about him quite a bit. He has written that 90% of the insects that eat plants can develop and reproduce only on the plants with which they share an evolutionary history. So for those insect populations, it is super important to maintain very specific plant populations to support them. Meanwhile, we are going through a biodiversity crisis. We know that more than 40% of insect species are in decline. And overall, there's been a 60% decline in the size of populations of mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, and amphibians since 1970. And over 1 million species are projected to go extinct in the next 50 years if we don't set aside enough habitat to protect them. More than 40% of insect species are declining and a third are endangered. Reports indicate that insect populations are declining by as much as 2.5% annually. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a huge number, but when you add it up over just a few years, at 5 years, you're looking at a loss of over 10%. At that rate, we're looking at a mass extinction of insect species within a century. Insects are essential for the proper functioning of all of our ecosystems. They're food for other creatures, they're pollinators, they're decomposers, they're recyclers of nutrients. And so when we don't have the services that insects provide, our food system and our larger ecosystems will start to collapse. We know that the alarm bells on biodiversity are sounding. Birds, for example, it's spring. I've been seeing a ton of birds in my backyard. It's great. I love it. But also I know that birds are kind of the canary in a coal mine. There's been, in less than a single human lifetime, we've lost 2.9 billion birds. That's about 29% of the total bird population since 1970. A lot of those birds feed, if not only on insects, then primarily on insects, or they'll use insects as a good source of protein, particularly in the spring. So to lose those populations, that's a problem. And that's a major issue for our biodiversity and the sustainability and the what's the word I'm looking for? The resilience of our natural ecosystems and our food networks. So the 5 primary global threats to biodiversity, these are changes in land and sea use, climate change, pollution, the overexploitation of species, and also invasive species and disease. Many of these drivers are related to one another and they compound one another. So Wild Ones is primarily focused on addressing the degradation and loss of wildlife habitat. For example of this, let's look at like a normal or an average suburban housing development. When they go in to build a suburban housing development, you see a disturbance of native soils. You see damage when the ground is excavated and leveled. You see houses that get built, roads and driveways get paved, lawns and non-native foundation plants and often street trees are installed. So there's a lot of soil disturbance. There's a frequent mowing. There's really liberal irrigation practices, and that invites opportunistic and sometimes really noxious weeds, and also which then promotes the overuse of herbicides. As a great example of this, there is a non-native ornamental plant, the Callery pear. I think it was maybe within the past 100 years, calorie pairs were introduced, and there was a cultivar of calorie pairs that were bred to be sterile, so they weren't supposed to reproduce. Well, if you're like me, you remember seeing Jurassic Park, and you remember Jeff Goldblum telling us that life finds a way. And those pairs evolved like out of sterility and were able to start reproducing. And now you can't step outside in Ohio and not see a calorie pair, particularly in the spring right now. And every time I drive down the street, I'm shaking my fist at all these calorie pairs because they're just everywhere and they're really difficult to get rid of. They're invasive and they are degrading local ecosystems because they're sucking up all these resources that could otherwise be consumed by our native plants. So as a conservation organization, Wild Ones is really focused on restoring that habitat value to landscapes that have been degraded by human activity. And so how do we do this? Well, we focus on native plants and promoting gardening using native plants. So what is a native plant? We've been talking about this for 20 minutes now, but what is a native plant? Well, Wild Ones defines a native plant as a plant that belongs to a species that was present in a region, habitat, or ecosystem prior to European settlement. So these plants have held an ecological niche in our landscape for centuries, sometimes more than that, and they reproduce primarily through open pollination through wind, birds, bats, moths, butterflies, bees, other insects. And so when we are talking about promoting native plant gardening, these are the types of plants that we really want to start seeing more of in our gardens. So why are we interested in native plants? Well, landscaping with native plants helps to restore those healthy and natural ecosystems that we know need preservation. Native plants provide food and shelter for insects and birds. They form the foundation of a lot of terrestrial food webs. They enable insects, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammal populations to thrive. They're a buffet for butterflies, bees, and other pollinators. And farms and gardens that are interplanted with native plants actually result in higher crop yields. So human life is dependent on a healthy pollinator population. And in order to have a healthy pollinator population, we need to have those native plants. Pollinators are responsible for 1 in every 3 bites of food we take, and they increase our nation's crop values by more than 15 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars every year. So native plants play a really important role in combating the climate crisis because they remove carbon from the air through photosynthesis, and because they tend to have very deep root networks. They're particularly effective at capturing and storing carbon. A lot of it they're storing underground. So individuals who are looking to reduce their carbon footprints and companies or countries that are exploring ways to reduce carbon emissions, one of the ways that they can do that is by incorporating native plants as a solution to the climate crisis. We could talk about the climate crisis all day. That's a whole other presentation, but that is just part of the bigger picture that we're working with when we talk about native plant gardening. So native plants, like we said, sometimes they have evolved for centuries, if not longer, to adapt to a region's soils, its winds, its freeze and thaw cycles, or just the general whims of Mother Nature. So they tend to thrive under those natural conditions, and they tend to do better under, let's call it benign neglect by otherwise over-attentive gardeners. I will be quite honest with you guys. One of the things that first interested me in native plant gardening is that it would take less overall effort and less overall investment of resources and time for me to have a native plant garden than a garden full of non-native ornamentals. Native plants require minimal inputs. They don't require a ton of fertilizer or supplemental water. They don't require a ton of significant maintenance once established. That's not to say that you don't have to do anything. You do have to go out and do some care, but it's a lot less than you might otherwise have to do. Because native plants tend to have really robust and deep root systems, they also help with stormwater runoff. They can help to mitigate erosion, and they can help to filter out excess nutrients, heavy metals, other toxins that are going to help to improve the water quality of our natural water systems. So how do you get started landscaping with native plants? Some of the big ways that we can do this are to reduce non-functional turf areas, literally just reduce the size of your lawn. This is another reason I personally am trying to pursue native plant gardening, is because if I can reduce my lawn and replace it with native plants that are going to be a lower, investment of time and resources for me to maintain, it's going to be good for the local ecosystem. It also means that I'm reducing the amount of lawn that my fiance has to mow every week during the summer. So he's a big fan of this plan as well. We can also plant butterfly gardens. We like to provide pollen and nectar, and a lot of butterflies, our native butterflies, have evolved to have very symbiotic relationships with specific plants. Monarchs and their relationship with milkweed is a really famous one. My mom, I think I mentioned earlier before the presentation started, she lives down in Florida, and for the past 5 or 6 years, every year she's been planting milkweed in her garden, and every year she goes out and she checks on a daily basis for those little caterpillars and makes sure that they have enough milkweed to eat, and then she keeps them safe. She keeps them safe from predators and lets them pupate, and then lets them hatch out, and then releases those butterflies. So she's doing her own work there to maintain that monarch butterfly population. It's really cute. It's super adorable. Every year I get pictures of butterflies, and it's really, really cute. So when we are looking at planting a butterfly garden, you can be sure to include those larval host plants like milkweed, as well as plants that are like grasses, hollow-stemmed perennials, things like that that are going to provide a really high quality habitat for those insects to overwinter. Other things you can do include planting a rain garden. So rain gardens are designed to mitigate stormwater runoff, and they help to absorb excess rain and snowmelt. Planting rain gardens, especially if they're adjacent to roads, driveways, sidewalks, or other impermeable surfaces, is also really going to help with that runoff, because they help to channel water away from structural foundations and into rain gardens that are going to welcome that soil saturation. So we're looking for species that really like having their roots wet. Other things that we can do: plant an acorn. Oak trees are super beneficial for insect populations, and in a lot of regions, oak trees support more moth and butterfly species than any other genus of native tree. An urban oak tree can host over 500 species of caterpillars, while a non-native ginkgo tree would support only one. If you're really interested in this topic and you want to learn more about this relationship between the insects and the native plants, definitely look at the work by Doug Tallamy. We mentioned him earlier, but he's done a lot of writing on the symbiotic relationship between native plants and native insects. Speaking of Doug, in his books, Bringing Nature Home and Nature's Best Hope, Doug Tallamy highlights the critical role that native plants play in supporting those local food webs. He shares that one of the big mistakes in our approach to conservation is the idea that nature, and I'm using big air quotes here, is something that happens over there. It's something that we set aside in preserves or in parks. It's something that's separate from our daily lives, that we have to step out of our daily lives to go visit and to see. And he really stresses that we can no longer leave conservation just to the conservationists. He proposes a homegrown approach to conservation, where we convert our urban and suburban yards and connect them with things like parking strips, public gardens, to form this really expansive patchwork of natural national park that provide opportunities for everyone to observe and engage with nature. If you're interested in learning more about this idea, you can go to homegrownnationalpark.org. But this is a really cool idea that Doug's proposing, to make sure that we are all sort of invested in the connectedness, not just of like our own gardens and our own yards, but also how does that connect to other gardens or other natural spaces across our communities and across our country. So let's talk a little more about what Wild Ones does specifically, and what I want to talk about is programs. So like we said, Wild Ones is a national organization. largely depends on the work of local chapters, but there are some national level programs and resources that are going to be really helpful for anyone who's getting started with native plant gardening or who just wants to get more involved in the cause. So if you tap into these national programs, these will help you determine how to start using native plants in your landscape. Excuse me. One of the resources that Wild One offers is they are currently offering, I think it's almost 24 ecoregion specific native garden designs on their national website. You can get these at wildones.org. They are totally free. You can download them. And what I love about them is you can go in and you can see some examples of how you might design a native plant garden in someplace like Boston or Chattanooga or Milwaukee or Toledo. And they will include a list of all of the different plants that are in that design. You know, and your yard might not look exactly like these design yards, but they are a really great place to start in terms of inspiration. If you're like me and you keep a Pinterest board of like your dream plants, this is a really good thing to add to those Pinterest boards so that you can build out your dream plant list and really start to get a sense for how all these plants work together. You know, how do they look when they're grouped together? Because it's not just about, you know, the environment, although we do care about that. It's also about creating these really beautiful spaces for ourselves to engage with on a regular basis. So these designs that we're talking about, these native garden designs, they were developed to demonstrate that native gardens can be both beautiful and achievable for gardeners of all skill sets. They're very DIY designed, they're very budget conscious, and they can be tailored to fit different sized and shaped residential lots. The native garden designs that we offer through Wild Ones, they offer a phased approach to installation, and they offer you some very detailed plant lists. To make finding plants easier, Wild Ones does provide on their website a list of native plant nurseries by state, but we also understand that this is by no means comprehensive. And sometimes the best resources for native plant nurseries are going to be your local chapter. And that is actually something that we have started to build out on our chapter website at greatercleveland.wildones.org. We've started to list out not only local nurseries that sell and sort of promote native plants, but also we've got a schedule of upcoming and recent native plant sales. So you should definitely make sure you check that out because that is going to be a resource that we will continue to maintain and is going to be a great source for you if you're looking to get some good deals on those native plants. Wild Ones also offers Seeds for Education grants. This is the Lori Otto Seeds for Education program. It's named for Wild Ones lifetime honorary director, Lori Otto, who is the founding inspiration for Wild Ones that we talked about earlier. And this is a program that focuses on connecting youth with nature through the design, installation, and maintenance of native plant gardens. So if you know of a local school or a nature center, an after-school care program, a community center or youth group located in the US that needs funding for a native garden or habitat for hands-on learning, please, please, please reach out and encourage them to apply for one of these Seeds for Education grants, because that's exactly what this is designed to do, is to promote and support that specific kind of engagement with native plant gardening. For the Seeds for Education program, grants are awarded to cover the purchase of native plants and seeds for programs that engage youth in planning, planting, caring for native plant gardens. It's an approach that's called Learn by Doing, where the education is not just based in a textbook or a classroom. It's, you're going to go out there, you're going to get your hands dirty, you're going to get in there and learn by planting the plants, monitoring them, caring for them. It not only gets more native plants in the ground, it also helps to cultivate a new generation of land stewards who are mindful of the importance of native plants. And those grants are awarded up to $500 per project, which can cover quite a few plants and quite a few native plant seeds. A few other things that Wild Ones offers is, let's see, there we go. We host free webinars that will feature experts in landscape design, botany, ecology, entomology, conservation and restoration. In nature, everything is connected, and so there's a growing list of topics related to the Wild Ones mission. We've already talked about Doug Talmy a bit here. This is a picture of him here. In 2021, he in 2021, he gave a number of talks for Wild Ones. He serves as an honorary director for the organization. And for a lot of chapters and also at the national level, we'll have recordings of those past webinars, and those are going to be available for free on the Wild Ones YouTube channel. So if you look for Wild Ones on YouTube, you can also find versions or recordings of those presentations available for free. At a national level, the national organization also publishes a quarterly journal. It's full of articles on native plants, member gardens, public gardens, restoration projects, book reviews, all sorts of really interesting information for anyone who's interested in native plant gardening. If you are a member of Wild Ones, you will receive a digital copy of the journal through email. And if you're fairly new to the organization, there's actually an archive of past journals available for viewing on the national website that is also publicly available, totally free. So that doesn't cost you anything as well. But if you're a new member, you will continue to get those quarterly journals delivered straight to your email as well. We also have an annual members photo contest. So we look forward to this annual photo contest at the end of each summer. Native plants aren't always really good at marketing themselves, and so we can use a little help from our Wild Ones members who are photographers or want to be photographers. So a lot of times our members will contribute photos that showcase the beauty of native plants, how they function in landscapes, how they look throughout the seasons. And these images will be used in Wild Ones educational and promotional materials, including a lot of the pictures that you've been seeing in today's presentation, like this one right here, demonstrating, again, that symbiotic relationship between the pollinators, the native bees, and the native plants that we're trying to promote. I do also want to talk a little bit about what our local Wild Ones chapter offers. So that's Wild Ones Greater Cleveland. All of these benefits, all of these opportunities are available to anyone who's a member of the organization at a national level. And you are able to be a member of the national organization without specifically being a member of a local chapter. However, if you are a member of a local chapter, there's all sorts of really fun and interesting and educational events and activities that we plan for everyone. And so here is just a list. I can get my slide to progress here. Here we go. Of some recent chapter events and activities. This isn't even everything that we've done this year. This is just within like the past 6 weeks. So in March, we had a seed and social event, and I've actually got my next slide has some pictures from that event. So you can see just how fun it is to be a member of your local chapter. We have a learning committee that we've started up, and that learning committee, I've been heading that up. Ray has also been helping with the learning committee to make sure that we are developing programming that is educational and that is meeting the needs and the interests of our chapter members. We have a pollinator pathway project that we've started up this year. Again, going back to that idea of, can we connect these little pockets of native plants? Can we connect them across communities and across the country? That is what a pollinator pathway is. So if that's an idea that's of interest to you, the Pollinator Pathway Project, they have regular meetings. Just correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's once a month. But we will have it.
Yeah, roughly once a month. Our next one is actually going to be this Thursday.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. So yeah, roughly once a month, sometimes a little more frequently, sometimes a little less frequently, but those Pollinator Pathway Project meetings to help promote the idea of connecting these native gardens across our communities. We have monthly chapter meetings. So we had our April chapter meeting just about 10 days ago. And in each of those meetings, we talk about, what we've done recently, what's going on for the chapter, upcoming events, and then each month we try to provide some educational content as well. We had a couple events for Earth Day. We participated in the Party for the Planet at the Akron Zoo, and then we also had an event at the Lorain County Community College. Just last week, we had the first session in a series that we've started that we're calling From the Ground Up. And that series is really focused on helping anyone who's new to not just native plant gardening, but gardening in general. I will admit that this was entirely selfishly motivated because I consider myself a novice gardener, and I was just so overwhelmed. Like, how are you supposed to get started? And then I've talked to, some of our newer members as they've joined the chapter who are also newer gardeners, and they were also like, I just don't know where to start. So we decided, okay, let's put together a curriculum that really targets those new gardeners and gives them practical knowledge and immediate skills that they can put into practice in their own gardens. So we started this just last week with our session on soil. So this is just how to prepare your garden for planting. And we had Jen Johnson from Native Roots Incorporated, which is a local native plant nursery. She came in and gave us a really thorough, very educational and informative talk about how to think about the soil in our gardens and how that really forms the foundation for a strong native plant garden. And then, hey, what's the most recent event we've had? It's this one that you're in right now, which is our information session. That is what we are doing right now. So welcome to our most recent chapter activity. As I mentioned before, just a few pictures I want to share with you guys from our seed and social event back in March. If my slide will progress, there we go. And you can see some of our chapter members. This event was a social event, primarily just an opportunity to come together. But then we also spent some time packaging up native plant seeds that we were able to distribute at those Earth Day events that we talked about just a minute ago. So you might be wondering, gosh, this is all really cool. This sounds like I have missed some really awesome opportunities to learn about native plant gardening and interact with other people who are passionate about it. Well, you're not out of opportunities. We actually do have a long list of upcoming chapter events and activities, starting with another pollinator pathway project meeting. We will have more of those educational seminars and sessions. Sorry, I am working from a very small text here. So let me see if I can make sure that I can see what's on this full list here. We have a science fair day. Ray is going to be facilitating a science fair day with the Andrew J. Wyckoff School just here in the next week or so to educate some students about native plant gardening and working with native plants. We have a learning committee meeting coming up, our chapter meeting for May, and then we have some additional educational opportunities and also some opportunities to actually get your hands dirty and get in there and start installing native plants in a native plant garden at the First Baptist Church in Shaker Heights. And then we will also have a workshop in June for identifying invasive plants. One of our chapter members, Nick Fletcher, has been very generous with his time and is going to educate us on how to identify invasive species that might be, trying to crawl into your native plant garden. And then we are actually going to get some real hands-on experience and help him weed out some invasive plants from a no-mow site down at the Doan Brook watershed. So I think that's going to be a really fun day as well. There are also lots of other things that we would love to pursue as a chapter, but one of our limitations is just the number of volunteers we can get to help with some of this stuff. So positions that we're trying to fill right now is our secretary role. Danielle Squire was until very recently our chapter secretary, and she stepped away so that she could focus on some other opportunities to provide education on native plant gardening within the community. But we're looking for someone to help us out in the secretary role. We're also looking for general volunteers to help us out with activity and event coordination. If you don't want to volunteer for like an ongoing thing, we would love just to have the occasional sort of specific event help for upcoming events. We're looking for help with our social media, our marketing, our membership committee, our learning committee. If any of these are of interest to you, please feel free to reach out to us. And then we also have what I've called our wish list activities. So these are things that we would really love to do. We just don't have enough hands. Some of these are programs that Wild Ones at the national level actually already provides structure for and guidance and even paperwork. So things like our Wild Ones mentorship program. This is where we will partner up novice gardeners or newer gardeners with folks who are more experienced with native plant gardening and give them an opportunity to learn in a one-on-one sort of relationship over the course of a year. They also have the framework in place for a plant rescue response team. So in situations where we hear that, and this has actually been really relevant for us recently, we've had a couple different situations locally where either like a school has said, hey, we love this native plant garden, but we're actually going to rip that out so that we can put in some more aesthetically appealing ornamental plants. Or if someone knows of a plot that has a bunch of native plants and it's going to get, redeveloped to turn into a suburban housing tract or something like that, we can put together this rapid response team where we can reach out to our members to say, hey, we need help. Bring your nursery pots, bring your buckets, bring your spades, bring your shovels. We're going to save these native plants. And figure out, where do we put these native plants? How do we help, find them a new home so that if those native plants are going to get dug up, they're not just getting thrown onto the trash heap. They're not, just getting thrown away or dying. And we are preserving that native habitat, even if we have to move it and redistribute it. And then another option that we're exploring right now, and again, would love to get some more help with, is our community outreach committee. And so this is a committee that we want to start up to really focus on promoting the mission of native plant gardening within our local communities, and that could mean not just planting our own flowers, not just talking to other gardeners, but getting out into our communities, talking to organizations, talking to companies, talking to our local and our state governments about the importance of prioritizing native plants. So getting a little more involved in the advocacy component of that Wild Ones mission. Like I said, a lot of things we would love to continue to explore as additional activities, but as a newer chapter, as a growing chapter, we're just running into some limitations in terms of resources. So if you or anyone would be interested in helping with something like this, please feel free to reach out to us at wildonesgreatercleveland@gmail.com. And just a couple little treats for you right here at the end. I did just want to share with everyone our website, which is greatercleveland.wildones.org. If you go to our website, like I mentioned earlier, that resources button right up there at the top, we've got some awesome resources in terms of local native plant nurseries, upcoming native plant sales, and then anytime we have an online chapter meeting or a webinar, we are recording those and posting those to the website so that those are available free of charge to our community members, regardless of whether you're a chapter member or not. But other than that, the big thing that we want you to do is plant native plants. Find a way to incorporate those native plants into your own gardens and into your own spaces, or find a way to promote that in the spaces that you interact with regularly to really help us promote this mission of preserving the biodiversity that we know is so important to our ecosystems and to our food networks, and to really the survival and the health of all of us. So thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. I'm just going to share one more slide with you, and this is just where you can follow us on social media. Maybe, there we go. Where you can follow us on social media on Facebook and on Instagram, or again, that website URL for you if you didn't catch that earlier. We would love to engage with any of you if you're interested in learning more about the chapter or more about the national organization. I will go ahead and pause here. Just in case if anyone's got questions about the chapter or how you can get involved, I'll go ahead and stop, and then I'm going to check the chat really quick because it looks like we might have a couple comments in the chat, and I just want to make sure that I'm getting to anyone's questions. So I'll stop there.
I have a question. If I become a member and then I do an event like the Shaker Heights native planting. I have a almost 7-year-old son. Would he be welcome to come, or no children? I mean, I don't know what your policy is on children coming
Sure.
along.
So Jessica, please feel free to interrupt me if I'm wrong on any of this, but we have never talked about having events that are like no kids. I've gone to a couple different events, just some of our social events. We've had kids, we've had, family members, we've had older folks, we've had grandparents. I think we consider these really to be family friendly events. And especially because so much of the mission is focused on education. Like we want you to bring your kids. Please bring your kids, because we would love to, help kind of educate them on the importance of connecting with nature, the importance of, caring about the environment. So yeah, unless Jess tells me otherwise, and I will, cede to her authority as the president of the chapter, but I would say that unless it's explicitly stated somewhere, all of our events are very kid and family friendly.
Absolutely. And if you're unsure of something, don't hesitate, because, if you feel, it's going to be too much, or you need to get a feel for the lay of land. I think part of that just depends on, what type of volunteering effort you're talking about. So an example, if we're out in a prairie, I think that sort of depends on the situation. But at the same time, I would say just let us know too. Because, depending on the situation and how many volunteers we have, we want to just make sure, we plan accordingly, because sometimes we have either snacks or drinks, or sometimes, that might change that type of activities we have at some of these events as well. And we want to make sure we gear that, because, we're building community here. Even when we're volunteering, it's still a community effort. So we do try to welcome all. So yeah, well, obviously there's a few exceptions, like an example, if we, like Steph said, it's very rare, but like we're going to volunteer, or at least Ray is, and hopefully one or two others, at a school, something like that, like, because it's already, very inclusive, specific to a certain set of kids. That might not be the best scenario, but almost, I would say 90% of our activities are very kid friendly.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent question. Thank you so much, Rachel, for that. I think that was I don't think that's something we've ever like explicitly talked about, but I do think is a really important thing to cover is just how open Wild Ones is, and how open our chapter events are to folks of all ability levels, or, literally just age differences. We are working to try to make events, and especially some of our webinars, as accessible as possible. Sometimes we will have limitations just from a technological standpoint, or just the spaces we're trying to get into. But we do try to make these as open and as welcoming and as accommodating as we possibly can.
Actually, Rachel, one thing I just want to point out, because I don't know, I can't remember if it was on the other slide. We have also an upcoming native garden that we'll be planting at the Amherst Rotary Club. And I do know we're going to have like the Girl Scouts there and things like that. So while we may still we're still figuring out logistics of everything, that gives you an example. There's several opportunities like that where we do work with children as well.
Very cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, well, I think that might be end of the questions, because I did check the chat. And Jess, thank you so much, as we've been going through this, for dropping links and comments in there. That's been super helpful. If we don't have any other questions, we might be able to end early, or if there's just anything else that the rest of the chapter members, some of our current chapter members, anything else that you would like to share tonight, please feel free to come on the mic and share that about your experience, or kind of what brought you to Wild Ones. It's all great information. It's all gravy. We'd love to hear it.
Well, there was one event that didn't make it onto your calendar. It was sort of it happened pretty quickly. But there was a big parade in Oberlin, Ohio. just on Saturday.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and it's kind of a hodgepodge of a parade, no theme, just anybody who wanted to get out there and march 2 blocks was welcome to attend. And I was there with a group from Western Reserve Land Conservancy that had organized the pollinator segment of the parade. There were dozens of people dressed up as, mostly, more than anything, monarch butterflies, but there were also bumblebees and other insects, and we were able to march down the street and we were shouting, "Save the native plants, go native," and "Stop using pesticides," and people were cheering back at us. It was wonderful. Then I'll have some pictures in a couple of days. I'll be able
Oh
to
my
share
God,
with
that's
you.
amazing, Ray. I feel like this is the first I'm hearing about this, and this sounds amazing. And I'm so sad that I couldn't be part of that, because I would absolutely love to dress up as a bumblebee.
We'll do it next year for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, I was about to say,
Fantastic.
that's the type of activities you guys are interested in. I believe is it the art museum? Or somebody's hosting something similar, but you're not allowed to have any like wording or anything, but yeah, you're supposed to work on costumes and other things like that. So hey, if we have the volunteers, we can make this happen.
I love it. I love it. That sounds so great. All right. Well, I think we will go ahead and wrap up just a few minutes early. I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. Thank you for the time. Thanks for listening to our spiel about Wild Ones. Hope to see everybody out at some of those upcoming events soon, or logging in for our chapter meetings. I probably should have mentioned that all of our chapter meetings are virtual, so they're very easy to tune in for. I'm sure I'm not the only person who has occasionally tuned into a chapter meeting and gone off camera for a little bit because you're in the middle of cooking dinner or doing anything else that you might have going on. But it's really easy, because those chapter meetings are virtual, it's really easy to tune in. We've had multiple folks in multiple different chapter meetings who will go off camera and then we'll tune in at some point to say, "Hey, sorry, I'm off camera. I am actively potting seeds, or I'm actively planting, plants right now," which I always just love to hear, because I'm thinking like, hey, come off camera. We'd love to see, we'd love to see all the plants. We'd love to see the seeds. This is a bunch of plant nerds. Of course we want to see what's going on. So those are always really fun as well. But a great opportunity to get involved. The virtual meetings allow for a lot of flexibility. All right, Jess, is there anything else you'd like to share before we sign off for the evening?
So if you have any further questions, like Steph said, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to have you guys become members. We're always also looking for more volunteers. So yeah, just don't hesitate to reach out. And I can't remember if you mentioned this, Steph, but our chapter meetings are the 3rd Thursday of every month as well. So that will always have the latest and greatest, and especially Facebook is a really great resource to see what other events, because sometimes we get invited last minute to a few events. So that usually always has the latest and greatest for us. And we're very excited because we just launched our YouTube channel today. So that's where you'll see a lot of the stuff. If you guys happen to miss meetings, we're probably going to start using more of that resource. So another great opportunity there.
Awesome. Very cool stuff. A lot is moving and shaking here.
All right. Thanks so much.
Have a good
All right.
night, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.